Welcome, gamers, to the start of a new Let's Play series. We're going to be playing Shadow Empire, which is one of my favourite games. It's came out a year or two back now. A game that's just keeping on with its development. There's going to be more and more things being added into the game over time. And the reason I wanted to cover it now is because we're not quite at the ocean worlds yet that have been introduced into the game, but we do actually have, this is the new beta patch for the game, 1.11.06, and I'm loving the changes that Vic, the developer, has actually added to the game just in the last month or so. So there's a lot of things to like about Shadow Empire. If it's been a while since you've played, you may want to have another look with this, not so much the actual standard version, but the actual beta version back in through here. So 1.11.06. Now, before I get started, a special thank you to my Patreon supporters for the ongoing support that you guys give. It does mean a lot to me, and I do want to sort of I try to remember to give you some appreciation to what you allow me to do with making these videos. So again, thank you for providing that little bit of extra stability, because it has become more and more difficult sort of trying to do things on YouTube in recent years. And so I do appreciate that support, and I don't want you to think that I take it for granted, because I really don't. Yeah, look, and if you are a regular on the channel, then welcome. I mean, welcome if you're not as well. And if you're not a regular and you do like this sort of content, please consider liking and subscribing. Now, I don't rush things. I do try to explain what I'm thinking. I know that some people, it drives them nuts because I don't get into it fast enough, but other people I know do appreciate that I do spend the time to actually explain what the thought process is to enjoy a game as deep and as rich as a game like Shadow Empire. And so I won't apologise for it as such, or did I apologise for it? Anyway, I'm not going to apologise for it, because that's just the way I play these sorts of games. I get so involved or immersed in games like Shadow Empire. And to try to sort of sum up Shadow Empire in a very, very sort of brief form, it's a war game, like at its heart. And a war game is sort of like, for me, a game where you're playing with little tiles that represent different sorts of units. And so you've got different war games. Traditionally, they're actually based on history, often to do with World War II, for example. Like, that's often most war games will sort of be done that way. In recent times, a lot of war games have actually now also come through with little figures to sort of represent the actual groups of units that you're then playing with. But you tend to be sort of playing like at a brigade level. It's not a squad level game, and this is not a squad level game. This is definitely a brigade or battalion sort of level game at its heart. So it is actually a war game. And but the other thing about the game is it's played across like you're playing on one world, but across a massive galactic empire that's collapsed. And so you essentially are, the galaxy has grown over the course of about 6,000 years, I think it is, from where we are now, into having like this massive galactic republic. The Galactic Republic has then collapsed over the course of about 200 years, and so that the most of the planets that are around now have been completely isolated. They're like Mad Max worlds, but the game, what it does is it produces these incredible planets that are just, and the planets themselves can be, ranging from lava worlds to jungle worlds to frozen worlds, all sorts of different things. But they're not just randomly, here's some ice and here's some lava. What it does is it actually builds the planets from a, like, it's got a it creates them almost as if it's creating like the galaxy at the time, or I guess the planetology is applied right from its formation billions of years ago, and then sort of builds it up like that. It's actually an incredible game, and I think I'm going to have to maybe go through in this episode just why that is just so damn good. Let's just do that actually right now. We won't play the first game, and I'll try to also, with this series, explain things with a newish player in mind, just to try to sort of help round out some of the questions that I sort of see on the forums and on Steam about the game, because it is a game that can be frustrating until you get your head into the right mind space to play the game. So I'll try to explain why there's certain things that I find that I just do as a matter of course now that a new player may not. and I'll try to be mindful of those sorts of things. So I hope I do a good job of that, because this is a game that you can get a mountain of enjoyment from if you know how to approach it. Most of these complex games are like that. Now, this game, in terms of its complexity, I think that you can look at complexity in a number of different ways. There's games that you need to keep on referring to rule books and reading things up just to make sure. And every time you go back to it, you've got to think, oh, okay, I've forgotten how to play this game. What are the rules? What are the funny little rules? This game's not like that. This game has got like a very in-depth and intricate network of things that sort of work, but with fairly simple mechanics bringing it all together. So it's like having I guess a complex recipe, but using very, very simple ingredients would be the way I'd sort of be thinking of it. Instead of a lot of war games in particular tend to be complex in both senses, like a complex recipe with very, very complex ingredients that you've got to do a lot of work to actually understand what they actually all are. This game, there are some of those things, but the game does present those for you to gain some understanding. So hopefully that will actually sort of give you at least a bit of an idea that you can come back to the game after you've learnt it and be able to pick it up pretty easily. It's just actually getting your head into that initial space to actually get the enjoyment. So let's start a new game, and I'll explain actually how the game is built, and then we sort of can go in from there. So as I said before, it's basically 6,000 years of from where we are right now in terms of the human history, and we do play as a human faction, and predominantly the humans are the ones that have expanded through the galaxy, and then there's a collapse at the back end of it. I think it's 200 or 2,000. I think it's 200 years. Anyway, let's start the new game. So it just loads in the various master files, etc. By the way, I'm using a couple of mods. I'm using a mod that I created for myself, which is, I think it's just called DAS Tactics Terrain Icons, and you can get that from the Matrix forum. I find I can't play the game without it because it sort of shows me what all the terrain is. So if you're wanting to get that, then there'll be a link in the description. I hope I remember to put that in there, but there should be a link in the description as to where to pick up the terrain mod that I'm actually using. Actually, I'm using 3 mods. I've got that mod. I've got Pymus's excellent mod as well, which actually changes the graphics of the cards that we use in the game. The game does have a card system which is fairly intricate. I'll explain that when we get in there, but it's not really the core of the game. But anyway, Pymus's mod is also being used, and then the last mod I'm using is a mod that I also created. I think it's just called DAS Tactics Icons or something, which is actually or Star Wars Icons. It's essentially I've just changed the graphics to Star Wars for the regimes. So not that it really matters that much. Anyway, the planetary class. You've got a whole range of different planetary classes, and what we might do is just generate a few of these just so you can get a bit of a feel for it before we sort of get started. Now, if you're a new player, you can really play any of them, but they all have different sorts of pros and cons. Now, if you're playing on a planet with very, very little water, it means you're going to have to find water. So if you go and start playing with a planetoid class or a moon class, you're not going to have freestanding water. You're going to have to mine ice under the surface to get your water. Now, no matter what you're playing, water is vitally important for you. And so mining ice is sort of what you would then need to do on these ones, which can really make it difficult for you in the initial part of the game. And so a lot of the game is then sort of built around trying to make sure that you've got access to water if you're playing the planetoid classes. In fact, let's just build one so you can see what I mean. I'll just generate one, I think, and then just show you. And so the features that you'll sort of find in through here is that you'll often sort of get things, for example, like where you'll have like dust or deserts, it's in the sense of either sand or dust. In this case, there's like radiation because of the Disillusion War that is sort of extending from back in through these sorts of ruins, back in through this side. You'll often find cliffs on these sorts of worlds where there's like fairly large cliffs. There may be areas, I think there's an area on here, where there's actually chasms as well. And so these become interesting aspects for you to fight across in the hexes. So the hexes themselves, you end up sort of having like interesting fights around these. These become quite defensive, similarly to mountain ranges, hills, etc. So this is these are the things that are added by the terrain icons that I sort of add in, so you can see exactly what a tall mountain is, what a low mountain looks like. So it just sort of spells out what's what, like low sand dunes, high sand dunes, with the way that the game actually does sort of work. And that's pretty much all you see. The big thing that you're missing from here is water. And so, and life, actually, is the other thing. You don't actually have any freestanding life. And so the troubles you have with playing on and the planetoids can be fun to play on. You're not going to have life, which means you're not going to have aliens, which means you're not going to have, but with no life, you're going to have no vegetation, which means you're going to have no biofuel. So there's no fuel that you can mine on the planet. There's no water because it's the nature of it is it doesn't start with any water whatsoever, which means you're going to have to also mine ice. So to get anything that uses fuel, you're going to need to either mine inside these ruins that you sort of see around the place. So you need to get hold of those to sort of see if you can find fuel from there just through scavenging. So these are the leftover cities of when the world was colonized before the Dissolution War, and so these are sources of things that you can then sort of go and get. What you will be able to get, though, is metal mining, rare metals, but that's about it, really. There's not a hell of a lot you can actually do. So it's sort of one of those interesting sort of maps where it's quite difficult to start on. So if you're a new player, I wouldn't actually go with one of these. And this is sort of looking very brown, I guess, but quite often they look grey. Here we go. I've just generated a small moon that had an amazing colonization phase where there was massive areas that were then built with these monstrously large cities that completely collapsed. And so this has got hardly anything alive on it, on the actual planet itself. Just a few little leftovers of what actually went on from the colonization after the Dissolution War. All these massive cities fell into disrepair, but these are just incredibly large blocks of ruins on this very, very small moon. But it's for me, the imagination just absolutely just flows away with what you can actually sort of do with these sorts of games. Again, we're sort of seeing like craters on the moon. We're seeing the cliffs, the mountains again back in through here. A big chasm that sort of runs through the middle of this into this old ruined city, for example. It's just incredibly good. And again, this one doesn't have very much in the way of sand, so it's mainly just going to be rocky plains, across the actual surface of the actual moon itself. This one here is interesting. This has actually got by the time you're going to be playing, has actually got an established rail line between these two locations. So this is actually it's interesting. That's all part of one empire. Very interesting. Oh, that would be I'm playing with Nemesis on. That would be the Nemesis player. So they've got a lot of head starts, and probably if we were playing, we'd be hawking, I would think. So that would be a very, very difficult game for us to play with nowhere to really protect ourselves other than in the ruins. So anyway, that's the moons. Let's go back out and generate something different. So if you're a new player, planetoid and moon classes, no fuel, no water, just so that you're aware of that. On the other side of things, you've then got different planets where you've got a chance to get life on a lot of these particular planets. Some of them not so much. The Siwa class is the opposite. This is your Earth-like planets. And so these create worlds with a lot of water, or a fair amount of water. They will always have life. Often the atmosphere is breathable as well. Let's just generate one of those. Now, in this case, I haven't actually generated the Dissolution War yet, but you can sort of see at the height of its civilization, this was a planet with lots of forests in it, big, massive farmlands running through here as well. You can see that these were farming out crops like these little colonies. So you've got different colonies out through here, little towns as well, sort of around the place. So a lot of agriculture on a Siwa world, which will then leave a lot of farmers left over after the Dissolution War has sort of run its course. Lots of water. So on these sorts of worlds, you tend to have the easiest type of start in the sense that you are going to be having a lot of you're going to have a lot of fuel because of the amount of life on the planet. You're going to have a lot of so you're going to have fuel. You're going to have easy water, and you only have to get connection to water to be able to then make use of it. So you wouldn't need to be. There will be ice as well on the planet. In fact, if we go to the North or South Pole, you can see that there's ice back up and through here, ice up through this area as well, ice across this area. So the game actually does model like the actual, like if it can do it, depending on the temperatures, when the planet is created. But the Siwa class is most likely to have this combination of cold poles, nice temperate sort of equators around the actual planet itself, lots of water and lots of life. And so the only thing that can really sort of stop you in these sort of planets in terms of getting started is you could end up rolling some pretty nasty beasts, I guess, some aliens on the actual planet itself. But in this case, I thought I'd just sort of show there's a mining operation back in through that location. And so the Siwa classes is probably your best bet as a starting player, simply because it gives you a lot of the starting resources that you do require. Now, if I just go back across and then just go and roll the Dissolution War, for example, we'll see some changes like this. We're looking at farmlands back in through this side. Around Asolis. Asolis has now collapsed completely. That's the ruins of Asolis that were left over there now. The jungles or the forests have now sort of re-encroached back into the landmass. There may not be any farmland left after this one, but you can see that there's still a lot of the population left over is farmers. And this is actually also, they're easier to deal with farmers than they are to deal with particularly raiders. Raiders can be very, very difficult. So some of the other worlds will have a high percentage of raiders, whereas Siwa class worlds, after the Dissolution War, tends not to have that. If we just go and have a bit of a look around the planet itself now. So is there any... Yeah, this one here has still got farmland. So that one actually still, even though the farmland sort of it was taken over, that's got open farms as well. This just means that they're growing Earth planets. This is all radiation. The history will actually sort of show different radiation. Like there could be all sorts of different things that went wrong at that particular point in time in the history itself. But again, interesting planets to sort of play on. So when you're playing still a Mad Max world in the sense that civilization has collapsed and you need to sort of try to eke your way back into the into some sort of semblance of civilization yourself. But but these are by far the easiest of the planets, I guess, to actually sort of then go and play. Now, we've looked at, I guess, two extremes, like from extremely barren worlds through to extremely rich worlds. Now, we've got a whole other class of planets in between. We've got like lava worlds in through here. Now, similar to the barren worlds, a lava world will basically just have like lava seas. This is not water. You can't make use of it. It's got lava rivers that run through it. It's going to have a lot of volcanoes on the actual surface itself. Usually, and it can actually have life, but usually no life at all. We've got more radiation, very strong radiation happening here on that North Pole. If I just sort of zoom out again, you'll sort of see the various lava lakes. And again, you'll notice that there's like these are sort of running from volcanoes into these particular lakes, sort of feeding the lakes themselves. There's a volcano that doesn't run in, but these two are running through to form this particular lake. That one has got a couple of volcanoes feeding into that one as well. And so very similar to the barren worlds where there's no freestanding water, there's no life essentially. So again, you're going to have to sort of find your biofuels, you're going to have to find your water. So it's a similar sort of start, but there are sometimes chances in these sort of worlds to sometimes get life, but it's very, very, very rare. Extremely rare, but there is a slight chance that you can actually generate very limited life. So this would be in the same classification of difficulty as the moons and the planetoids. And then you've got, like, I guess you'd call the desert worlds. You've got the Lemos class in through here, and if we just sort of read that one, so it's not quite desert planets, but not much better either. They have some amount of liquid water, but they are always void of life. Now, actually, I think I've seen them sometimes with sort of rudimentary life. If they would have life, they would be classified as either Siwa or Medusa class, which we'll come back to in just a minute. But these are desert worlds with water. This is your sort of like your more pure desert planets. So their key characteristics is they do not have a drop of liquid water on their surface. It's rare but possible they host an alien biology with non-water-based type of life. Now, that also isn't strictly true. You can actually sort of get some. We might generate one of them straight away. I'll just generate away. Okay, so in this instance, this is a planet that's just gone through the apocalypse. the Dissolution War. And you'll notice that in this case, we don't have any farmers on this one. There is no water on this particular planet that I generated. And there are nearly 40% of them are raiders. So you can expect the minor factions to be quite aggressive. Just be aware of that one. And you've got scavengers as well. So this is not a easy planet to play on. Particularly, you've got no water, so you have to find ice. And you also got no life, and so you're going to have to sort of generate very much like a planetoid. It's going to be the same sort of difficulty, but with a bigger landmass, I guess, to sort of then have a look at. This was one that again has massive ruins. That's just random, not random, but it basically is. It depends on how much the world is colonized as to the sorts of ruins that you're going to get. I'll go through how you can try to sort of manufacture your own sort of feel about the game. Now, this one doesn't have very many sand dunes either, but some of these worlds can be quite full of sand dunes. Some of them can be very, very open. Anyway, let's continue on. So this is a purely desert world. So that's your Seth class. Then you've got your Lemos class, which is sort of like, comes down, as I say, this one should have some life, and it will have a little bit of freestanding water as well. Okay, well, this is actually really quite interesting. So in this planet, you'll see they've got freestanding water. When I was generating the planet, before colonization, and this is actually, we're now in the colonization phase, so we've had like hundreds of years of colonization, you'll notice that there's actually now greenery on this one. Now, there wasn't there before. The humans brought this with them. And if we have a look and read what actually went on, so Soterio Major was colonized in the year 7118. It received colonists for 876 years, albeit a very difficult atmosphere. Earth plant life managed to take root on this planet, which is what we're sort of seeing in through here. That was not what was there. If I go to the previous steps and look at the where is it, the biosphere? It's completely lifeless, basically, in the biosphere. So I'll just go back to the current step. So in the 876 years that the planet was colonized, this increased the oxygen levels by 0.9%. So the game models all these really complex things. In this case, like if I re-roll this, then there may be colonists that come. Like there was 40 million colonists that came in this instance. If I re-roll, will they bring their stuff again or not? They did again this time, a little bit. Only 13 million there. I'll just re-roll again and just sort of see if there is still something that they did actually bring. Yeah, so they increased this one. Actually, they did they managed to increase the oxygen levels by 14%. Depending on what does happen here. So the game can really randomly. In fact, in this case, we can now start to see that we've got grasslands and some forests that weren't there before. So this is really quite interesting the way it sort of does work. If I just sort of leave that one there, but this is a Lemos class where you can get life like this, but this has been brought by the colonists. Most of the planet is just big open deserts, but there is water on these particular planets, and all you need for your water supply, even just this little area in through here where there's like some creeks that lead nowhere, is enough water to feed a civilization on these planets. So so just be aware you can do a lot with a planet where there's any sort of freestanding water. Now, I don't think that the life here would have been around long enough to generate any sort of biofuel as such that you would be able to mine. So I would think that wouldn't exist on this particular planet. In fact, we can test it. Now, I'll talk in some depth as to how to actually sort of play the game, but if you press the number 1 key, or if you go down to your not map moves, this one in through here, you can hide the units. Now you'll see we've got ice underneath there, so that's if we do need water. Now we do actually have free water around, so we won't need to mine the ice. But you can see we've got rare metals and normal metals. You'll always start off with if the planet can support certain sorts of things, it will then have it here. You'll always have ice on the planets, so every planet will have some sort of ice. So there is actually ice underneath there, but there's no fuel anywhere. So there's no sort of fuel supply because there's no life on the actual planet other than what was introduced from like the grasses that you sort of see in through here, or the forest down this way. These were introduced into the actual planet itself. So there you go. It's sort of it's really rich and deep the way the planets are formed, and it really grabs my attention, or not my attention, my imagination as to what you can sort of see on these different worlds. I'll continue on. We'll go and build one of everything. So that was the Lemos class, which does actually have water but no life. if we sort of scroll back down to the bottom here, there's a couple of extras that were then added, the Hydra class and the Morgana class. Now, the Morgana class is an interesting class. This is actually my favorite algorithm for planet generation. And what this one is a planet that is usually very mountainous and also very arid, but has a subterranean canal-like system that makes numerous oasis regions possible. And there's a good chance of the planet has alien life. And so this one is like a desert planet that does support life. And if we go and click on that one, actually I'll just go back to the finished one. And so these planets do have water. They do have life on them, or they can have life on them. But then they've got big desert regions in between as well. Now, the reason I like desert regions is because tanks work incredibly well on them. So these are sort of like open, ready for tank warfare. The choke points will be wherever the mountains sort of define the choke points, essentially, on these sorts of worlds. So for me, these are a bit of a best of everything, because you do actually have your water, you've got your life, so you can actually sort of find fuel on the actual planet itself. You've got big open areas for tanks. So this will probably be almost as easy as the Siwa class. The difference here is that quite often you don't actually have like full-on farming, although this one does have a lot of farms. This is just the colonization phase at this point in time. There's still farms in through here as well, but we're not seeing the actual farms themselves. So there's one. If we have a look at, if I just go to the next phase, you can see down through here, like 10% agricultural economy is fairly large, to be honest, on these worlds. If I just go continue, and we'll just play out the Disillusion War and just sort of see whether we end up with farmers or, we've got a fair number of farmers. That sort of is a good indication that the planet is going to be relatively easy to play. So anyway, that's the Morgana class. Let's have a look now up at the Boreas class, which is sort of like more your frozen worlds. These can still be almost like a desert world as well, to a degree. Now, these worlds are just frozen, very, very cold worlds, usually devoid of life. So again, making it difficult because you won't have any you'll have access to ice. No freestanding water as such can make life very, very difficult. You do need to actually have blue water to be able to then make use of the freestanding water. So even though you've got ice everywhere around you, that you can mine very, very easily, you still got to do the mining. You can't just rely on having freestanding water. Sometimes these can be generated with enough heat to allow a little bit of freestanding water around the equators. So you can actually get water that way. But again, this would be a difficult world to play because of the fact that you've got to mine for your water and also find a different way to then create your fuel. And you do that through your agricultural aspect when you are trying to sort of play the game. There's a few different ways you can get fuel, but that's sort of like the easiest way if you don't actually have any life on the actual planet itself. Okay, let's go and generate a new sort of planet. So if we move now down from the Boreas class and have a look at I guess, two of the worlds that have like a fair amount of water, like we looked at the Siwa class, which is our most Earth-like. We've then got two others. We've got a Medusa class back in through here. So a planet will often have some liquid water and rainfall. Key characteristic is that these planets have a hostile alien biology. And then the Hydra class, which is a planet with lots of liquid water, rainfall, and lots of swamps. It might be similar to a Siwa class world or to a Lemurs class world, but it almost always has more water. Good chance the planet has alien life. And so these are, I guess, like this one in particular is getting ready for the oceans build of the actual. So there'll be water worlds coming next, or not next as in next week or anything, but when Vic has sort of figured out the best way of actually handling like movement across waterways, so you can actually have islands. This is the precursor to that. Let's start with that when I come back to Medusa. And so this Hydra world has got like lots of massive forests, jungles, grasslands, but lots and lots of water. And the water then creates choke points, for the actual armies to then sort of fight across. So again, interesting battles and very interesting choke points. And as this is the precursor to being able to actually have islands that will be coming soonish, I hope. I don't know when they'll come, but that will be a completely new phase of the game when we actually can have land masses with that don't have to be connected. At the moment, all the land has to be connected because you've got no way to travel across the oceans. But as I say, that will be coming soonish, I hope. So anyway, that's a Hydra world. And the last of, I guess, the planetary algorithms is the Medusa class, which is this one here with the hostile alien life on it. The hallmark of these worlds is they tend to have a fair amount of water on them. They tend to have a lot of life, as in terms of forests and things, which, again, fighting can be difficult in these. And if they do actually have aliens on them, the aliens will tend to be fairly strong. So this can be a tricky prospect to play on. Usually you get bogged down in the forest, so I don't particularly like playing on these because this one's actually not too bad. You do actually have big open areas back and through here where tanks could actually run rampant through these sorts of more desolate areas on the actual planet itself. But the vast majority of it would be sort of like forest fighting or jungle fighting. And you're probably going to be fighting a lot of alien creatures on this particular world. I've left it at the biosphere phase, so you can sort of have a bit of a look. This one here has got like the top of the evolutionary life form has got ditetrapods, which are a land-dwelling large 13-metre top predator. Resembles a vertebrate analogue, so it's got sort of like bones. Its chemistry is water carbon-based and is oxygen-breathing, so I guess similar to Earth-like creatures, but this one is stands 13 metres tall. Now, it also has sentient life forms as well, and so these are reptiloids. So these are essentially reptilians, are the sentient life form, and will they be aggressive or not? We don't know until we get into the game. They're like the aliens can be really they can range quite a lot between different capabilities, from being extremely aggressive and very, very strong to extremely weak. So you've got a whole sort of gamut there. But at 13 metres tall for these particular aliens, that's quite a lot. So you do tend to end up with a lot of different sorts of life in through here, lots of different sorts of animals that you've got to then contend with in a fairly difficult environment in these sorts of areas. So anyway, that's, I guess, the different sorts of planets you can play as. Again, this would be okay for someone just starting, but I would be playing Siwa class or maybe Medusa class, something like that, if you were a new player. Let's now go and start our actual game. So let's just go back in, and I'll just go through and now explain. This will be a fairly long episode, by the way. I'll go through now what to look for if you want certain things when you are getting through your planetology and all the different steps to then go and create a planet. Let's go and restart. The one that we haven't looked at is Unclassified, which essentially is a bit of a hodgepodge. So when you play on an unclassified planet, expect anything. It could be a planet similar to one of the classes listed above, but it could also be something else altogether. Let's start there and work our way through, and I'll just tell you what does what on the actual planet itself. So I'm playing on a normal to large size. So you can either play from a small to normal sized, normal to large, or large to super sized. Let's just play on normal to large sized. Now this will be small, like the Earth-sized planets tend to be large, considered more large. So these tend to be smaller than Earth, which means we've got less gravity, etc., etc. So everything is modelled, everything sort of works on these things. Let's just go back and choose Unclassified. Now, the history class is how I want the game to be sort of set up. I'm going to be playing with severe violence. I'm going to have a nemesis, which means we're going to have a very, very powerful faction against us right from the start. And so that's going to be a problem, trying to deal with them. And this will be a difficult game, I've got to say, playing with the Nemesis player in the actual game itself, and all the mages will be spread out. That's the only sort of history class elements. If you're a new player, don't turn on severe violence, don't turn on Nemesis. Do turn on spread out, just so you don't have to deal with mages right from the very, very start. Don't immediately go to alien life. Alien life actually can get in your way when you're trying to learn the game, and to be honest, even though it's really interesting having alien life on the actual planets, it doesn't really do much in terms of your actual game. So whether you have alien life or not, that's okay, but don't think that the game is about alien life. It's actually really not. It's the alien life adds an aspect to it, but you don't have to play with that one. So anyway, the other thing you may want to do, Haven of Calm, so your planet will be relatively lucky during the Dissolution War, and will keep some havens of peace that survived the worst of the Dissolution War. That will sort of give you a bit more civilization left on the actual planet. So you can still have both of those. Like that still actually would then work. It just means you've got more infrastructure around, so you may want to turn that one on. So Robinson Crusoe, by a fluke of chance, human-played regimes are the only surviving major mages on the planet. With Nemesis selected, there'll be one AI major regime added. So, human played regimes are the only surviving mages on your planet. Yeah, so that's okay. So basically, if you do Robinson Crusoe, you're the only other. In fact, let's throw that one on with Nemesis, because what that one then will do. Actually, no, I'll leave it off. I'm going to end up with multiple mages if I don't have that one turned on. If I have Nemesis turned on and this one turned on, it's just me and the actually, let's do that. It's just us versus the Nemesis. Why not? That'll be fun. Outpost colonies. So during colonization, this planet received only a small amount of colonists. As a result, population will be sparse as well after the dissolution war. This is not what you want if you're a starting player. You do want to actually have a fair few ruins, because the ruins will feed you certain things fairly easily in the early part of the game, or even throughout the game, to be honest. It can be a source of, as I said before, it can be a source of fuel if you don't actually have any fuel on the actual planet itself. So I would not bother with that one so much. Survival stress back and through here. The defragmentation of power went further on your planet than on others. Expect many regimes to be present. So this one here, you can end up with lots and lots of sort of smaller regimes going. I'll just leave it. I'll leave it. I don't think that can actually be played. Oh, well, actually, it looks like it can be played with that. Oh, maybe that would just be lots and lots of minor factions. I won't play with that one. And then alien life, I think, is one that, as I said before, people gravitate towards, because it will always generate alien life, even if the planet doesn't really suit alien life. You can sort of force it into certain planets. I know that often when I'm streaming the game, people will ask me to turn that on because they think that that's what adds the fun to the game, and it's really not. So don't feel that you have to play like it's just as fun, just as engaging playing on a barren moon as it is playing on one of those Medusa jungle worlds. Like they've each got their own charm about them. For me, that's not an important one. Now we'll go continue. The generation settings. These are important if you're a new player. Detailed planet generation will allow you to then have a look and see exactly what's being generated each step of the way, which we're going to go through. I'm going to be going through that in some detail. So you can actually just go straight to quick planet generation, or just drop me in a game now, essentially, where you bypass all of the planetary generation. It will still get generated. It will still generate histories and so on and so forth, but you don't have any say over it. Whereas I think it's good, particularly if you're new to the game, just I can then at least explain what to look for. If you're wanting a very particular type of planet, you can actually get what you want. Fog of War. So I'm going to have know the map, otherwise complete Fog of War. So I think this is more realistic in terms of we know the layout of the planet, which we've had colonists there for thousands of years, so or hundreds of years at least, and so we wouldn't lose that information. So knowing the map is okay, but other than that, it's going to be complete Fog of War. So number of human players, just one human player in this case. So if you're playing multiplayer, you can sort of set those up. The number of initial zones. Now I've just got a city-state start. I think that's actually fair enough. I'm sort of tempted to go 2-zone start because we went with the Robinson Crusoe start. But I think we'll just start with a single city-state. That way I can just talk a little bit about what to look for when you're playing. But we are going to give ourselves 2 armies right from the start. This one gives you enough to do what you need to do early, but you've still got to sort of pay for it, and you've still got to sort of manage those 2 armies that you end up with at the start. So pros and cons, but I think more pros than cons if you do sort of start with 2 armies, particularly if you're starting on a planet with life around you and you need to push them back. You will need armies very, very early if that's the case. You can actually put story modules on. Now, I'm going to keep these off. These for me, they are interesting, but don't really add a lot to the actual gameplay. So I tend to just leave them off. But they can, like for me, the game can get quite heavy in the mid to late stages in terms of there being a lot going on. And the last thing I want at that stage is to have more things going on. So that tends to be what these things actually do. But by all means, if you like the story, they're not stories as such, but if you like the extra content that gets added with these are extra cards, etc., then by all means turn them on. Now, the development and technology level, I would strongly suggest if you're a new player, start at tech level 4. I know that some players do prefer starting at tech level 3, not new players, but I know that some experienced players like starting there because of the challenge. But it really is, tech level 4 gives you everything you need at the start to be able to meet your needs as long as you evaluate them correctly. So I think tech level 5 is a little bit too much. These are what this is it's the square of whatever this number is. So tech level 3 start will give you 9 techs. Tech level 4 will give you 16. Tech level 5 will give you 25 techs. Now, they're not really random either. Like, they're always the same. I would love them to be a bit more random, but they're not. So also we will play with Air Forces enabled, but the chances of us actually using Air Forces is extremely remote, just so that you're aware. The building an Air Force is quite a tricky prospect. If we do have a planet that is suitable for Air Forces, then yeah, we'll see how we go. Now, the development speed, I like it slower rather than anything else. So I do like a sort of a bit of a slower game in terms of the ability to sort of do research, etc. So I'll just go with a slower development. The organisational level, now you're probably going to be tempted to go to all 8 councils if you're a new player. Don't do it. It's very hard to pay for them. And you split up your income. Like, the game is all about getting bureaucratic points that you then allocate out to your different councils. When you start with only the Supreme Command Council, you can then really cherry pick what councils come in at the times that you need them. And you can always get whatever you currently need. So it's easier to play the game with only the Supreme Command Council, so just be aware of that. The others will then make it more difficult for you to progress. For example, the basic 4 councils don't even include the one council that we're going to be really looking for probably as our first council, which is the Interior Council. So that's actually something, because we need to get our taxation under control. So the 4 council, the four basic ones don't include the Interior Council. So at the very start of the game, that'll probably be the first one that we do end up going for. Now, I'm going to be playing on hard mode, which is going to be hard, actually, I've got to say, with the Nemesis player. Very hard, actually. Hard is hard in this game. Beginner is... I actually feel that beginner should be regular, like that should be considered. If you are a beginner player, don't think beginner is going to make life easy for you. It's not. It's still going to be a very, very difficult game. And I think that some players may be sort of clicking on beginner or regular and then being shocked at just how difficult it is until you really get a feel for the game. So hard is what I'm going to be playing on, but don't play that if you're a new player. You can give the AI even more time to think. Now, the AI is very, very good in the game. So the AI actually does a very, very good job of actually thinking through scenarios and sort of coming up with different attacks. It's got a whole series of different algorithms that it also uses. When you click this button on through here, what that does is tell the AI to explore even more algorithms of what it can actually then go and do. It doesn't mean that they're going to be better or worse than what it already sort of thinks through with its standard set. It just gives it more options, but we don't need to play with that one on. Now, the game variations, disable epochs. I used to play with this one turned off. I now keep it on because you get extra cards when the epochs change. And to be honest, they don't have a massive bearing on the game itself. And easy logistics. Now, is that a good idea for new players? If you really don't like the logistics system, yeah, flick it on. Basically what it is it doubles the range of your logistics network. You're still going to have logistics. You're still going to manage it, but it just doubles what it can then go and do. I love the logistics in the game. For me, it's actually one of the main features of the game, so I don't turn that on. And I don't know, because I've got that bent about the game where I really do like the logistics, I would recommend players not to play it, but that's probably because of my own biases, to be honest. So if you're a new player and you don't like the logistics, like if you play a game and think, what the hell, why are my guys starving? Why am I losing guys left, right and centre? Then flick it on. And that way, at least you can then play where you're more focused on the actual units and the fighting more so than than trying to feed them and supply them. But as I say, the supply aspect of the game is something that I find it as a massive, massive feature. I love it. So anyway, let's just go back across. We'll continue on from here. These settings, as I say, can have a big, big bearing on your game. So just really, really look through them and pick what you want. Okay, we'll just go continue. Now, planetology does a lot of things, and you may just be tempted to sort of skip straight past this. You'll notice that the world that we've got generating underneath is just full of at this stage just large sand dunes. It's just an amorphous blob in space. And it's set up, so a planet in an eccentric and slow orbit around an orange KO star. So orange stars are fairly cold in comparison to our sun. Our sun is a G2, I think, star. And so these are more towards the reds. And the 0.54 AU is that, like, it's about half the orbital distance away from where the Earth would actually be. And so in this instance, and I'll regenerate a few of these so you can sort of see how varied they can actually then go and be. That doesn't have a massive bearing on what we do, but the combination of a cold star, a distance away from it, we've got a slow orbit around this particular planet itself. The gravity, it's only 33, so it's only a third the size of what our Earth is, because it's only got 0.34 gravity. The gravity has a bearing on aircraft, depending on the combination of gravity and atmospheric pressure. So just so that you're aware, on its own, gravity doesn't matter that much. Temperature at negative 28 degrees. This is the average temperature across the actual planet. So it will be hotter around the equator and colder up around here. So most of the planet is probably going to be frozen. There may be a little strip around the middle here somewhere where there might be some freestanding water if we're lucky. Now, the planetary age has a massive bearing on on whether you can get life or not. So if you're wanting life, generate up until you get over 3 billion, sort of more up towards the 4 or 5 billion in terms of how many years that the planet should have been formed for. And you're only going to really get these around yellow stars and orange stars. So you're looking like that because these are old stars. The new bright burning stars like the blues and the white stars will not have planetary ages that go anywhere near out this far. This also has a bearing on your atmosphere and so on and so forth. Now, the map size has to do with the actual size of the planet itself. So this is a fairly small map that we're actually playing on. It just randomly sort of generated those sorts of parameters. Now, if I re-roll this, here we go. We've got an orange-yellow G5 star, so still a little bit cooler than the Earth. The temperature has now dropped to negative 18, and a very, very good chance of life. The planet is slightly bigger. It's half the size of Earth. And this one has got like a better tilt. Now, the tilt is going to, you can see this one is a slightly eccentric and slow orbit around an orange-yellow G5 star. The tilt is going to give us seasons. The slow orbit is going to make it so that the actual orbit, like a year, is going to be longer than on Earth. And so that's what we sort of have in through there. And it's around about the same distance away, but around a colder sun than what our sun actually is, just slightly colder. And so we have a temperature. Now, in the game, 15 degrees is the average temperature on Earth. And so that takes into account the freezing poles as well as things going on. Now, there should be freestanding water if we generate water on this particular planet. 4.3 billion years is going to give us the chance to get life. Let's use this one as an example and just keep on moving forward. But again, we can have, we're not going to get, I'll just re-roll and see if I can get, here we go. Now, this is one where we've got like a blue-white AO star. So this is a very, very young star, which means we're not going to get anything over about 0.2 billion. We're not going to get life on this planet, no matter what we do. They burn extremely hot. So this is really just going to be a very, very young planet that's going to be almost like a planetoid if we sort of played with this particular one. I'll just re-roll again until we get like a yellow. There's another one. This is a white star. Again, very, very young planetary age. No life around these sorts of planets. This one's colder. We're 16 astronomical units away from the actual sun itself. Re-roll. Here we go. We've got a yellow-white F5 star. And so this one is going to be fairly cold. We've got 2.2 billion years. Chance of some life, but it won't be very advanced life. Let's just re-roll until we get something that's going to... I'm just looking at the life. 5 billion. Now, this is an interesting one. This is a very hot planet. On a very extreme tilt at 39 degrees. It's still got a slow orbit. Planet in an almost perfect and slow orbit around an orange KO star. We're only 0.34 AU away, and we've got a very hot average temperature of 32 degrees Celsius. This is going to be a fairly, like the seasons on this world are going to be really, really different. You'll also see there's a spin there as well. Now, quite often, if the spin, and this is a fairly sizable planet as well, so at 0.75 G, so almost Earth-like in terms of its scale. And this one through here, we've got like 21 hours is the spin. Now, if the spin is actually too short, it can push the atmosphere off the planet when it's being created, which may mean to a thinner atmosphere. So this one may have a thinnish atmosphere, which then would mean that using aircraft may not be viable. But 21 should be okay. Let's just go continue with this one. This will be our planet. So now we go to the next phase. So that's just the planetology. A lot goes on with this. A lot goes on. Now, this is actually where one thing you may want to sort of be looking at through this side. You can see through here, we've got like a range of temperatures in the Arctics, which they just touch the freezing aspects in the Arctics, but most of the temperature, it's fairly temperate all the way through around the poles. Around the tropics, it's extremely hot. So it's got a very, very hot tropical area. The Arctics, there won't be much ice if ever. Now, the actual seasons, you can see it's got winter, late winter, early spring, early summer, summer, late summer. Every single season that we see through here is the season on this particular planet, but these represent 2 months on Earth. And so we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So we've got 20-month rotation basically for its year takes 20 months, not 12 months. So it's got a slower orbit than a slower rotation, a slower orbit actually. Sorry, than what Earth does. And so an arid planet with minimal surface water. It's got 13%. Now, one of the things to look for is if don't plan a planet with more than about 20% of mountains, if you can help it. 13% oceans means that there's going to be a fair bit of water on the planet. If we just go and click down the bottom here, it says random, we can then sort of scroll out. Now, we can see there's a lot of water on this planet, which means that there's actually going to be a very, very good chance of life on this planet. It's a nice big planet as well. With lots of water actually, which is really, really quite nice. And the mountains, the mountains aren't crazy. The mountains form nice little choke points around different areas. This is a really quite interesting planet. One thing you'll notice is all these numbers all over the place. This is the rainfall. And so when you've got a planet there's not one area on this planet that doesn't receive rain. So this could be a jungle world. Ultimately, the way it's sort of showing, there's a few areas that aren't quite as everything gets rain. Basically, there's going to be jungles and all sorts of things on this particular planet. I can just tell looking at this one straight away. Let's just bring this one back in. So this is the geology. Now, a bit of a giveaway with this one. When you read this one through here, or actually when you look at this one here, the wind speed of 13 meters per second. If this is over about 6 or 7 meters per second, it usually means that aircraft are viable, because it means that to have wind, you need atmospheric pressure. And so there is actually atmospheric pressure on this particular planet, which is also what's pushing the rainfall around as well. And so we have, the planet will have an Earth-comparable atmosphere. The highest mountain reaches 5 kilometers, while the deepest sea floor is negative 600 meters. The planet is still geologically active, which means that somewhere on the planet will be a or some volcanoes. They may not be freestanding on the planet. They can, but it can mean that it does actually have geological activity. There's a whole lot of swamps up in through there. I'm not seeing any volcanoes, but it is considered to be geologically active. Yeah, I'm not sure where they would be. But there is a mantle underneath the surface, and so that's also something that you can actually then go and mine because it is geologically active. So that's important to sort of know these little things. Not it's super important, but they all have a bearing on what resources you can then make use of. Okay, let's continue with this one. This one looks good. And now the biosphere. And so this one here, we've got freon, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide. In this case here, hardly anything. Like it's got an insidious atmosphere, so it's not going to be friendly for humans. You can see there the water is water, but it's very brown in colour. So like if we got biological herbivores, so sort of where we actually do have, and these are nitrogen breathing. Now, if we started with a very, very young planet, let's just say we started with one of the blue or white stars with a very, very small, we're not going to have different sorts of atmosphere. We're going to have helium, hydrogen, and I forget what the other one actually is, but we're not going to have the diversity of being able to sort of have different sorts of atmospheres. Let's just re-roll and see what else we can get. But in this case, we've got a planet that has got hardly any life. It's just the building blocks of life. But we did actually choose a planet that had enough time. I think it was 5 billion, I think, on this one. If we go to previous steps, we can then sort of have a look and see, 5 billion. And so we do actually have the capability for this planet to generate life. So this was probably more on the level of unlucky. And so let's just re-roll and see what we end up with. So you'll see how different the thing will actually be. This one's completely lifeless. By the way, the air pressure, this one's got nitrogen, carbon dioxide. The air pressure is 870. Now, if that's more than the 0.77 or whatever it was gravity, like if this is millibar, so in bars that would be 0.87. This does make it viable. Like the atmospheric pressure is higher than the gravity of the actual planet itself. So again, having a bit of a look at previous steps, we have a look down through here. The gravity is 0.75, current step. The air pressure is 0.87 bars. And so as long as that's higher than the gravity, then it means that aircraft are viable on this planet. Let's just re-roll. This is, I don't mind this, to be honest, but I will re-roll and we'll get some life. Here we go. So we've now got, actually this is also just early life forms back into here. Here we go. I've now generated a fairly different sort of planet. So you can see the differences in it, like, because this is all terrain that you're then fighting through. There's a lot more forest in this particular one. So, 4 billion years ago, this planet started the process of abiogenesis. Currently, the planet has complex life forms as skeletons. Types of species include protocellular organisms, bacteria, algae, amoebas, seaweed, sponge analogues, coral analogues, mollusk analogues. Now, these are the basic building blocks, like as to how life was generated, but the life then goes through a world of its own, and we can go through that in just a second. So we'll go through actually what this all means. Worm analogues, trilobite analogues, crustacean analogues. So a lot of different life has been sort of formed on this particular planet. And it tries to keep this fairly amorphous, like it doesn't actually get too exact with what you're sort of finding on the planet. So there's a bit of imagination that you've got to sort of make use of with this. And if we have a look at the top of the evolutionary life form, at the moment on the planet, the gastroannelid is a land-dwelling large 3-metre carnivore. It resembles a worm analogue. Its chemistry is water carbon-based and it is oxygen-breathing. Now we've got actually, this is an interesting world for the simple reason we've got nitrogen and oxygen, and it's very oxygen-rich. And that's sort of making the atmospheric human hazard of none, the xenobiological hazard of none, the atmospheric farming hazard of none, which means that we can actually build farms. We can build open-air farms if it's in the right temperature range. And we'll go through. So this is one we will play on. This will be an interesting one to sort of show how things can sort of develop. The alien tissue nutrition, if we sort of hunt these worms and other different sorts of creatures, it's got reduced value, but it's not like we can still eat the aliens and eat the actual eat the vegetables or the actual plant matter on the planet as well. Now the vegetation level is only shrubs and bush. It doesn't actually have large trees. We can see it's just got light forest in through here, but it is still forest nonetheless. It's just almost like scrub, I guess, where the trees are probably going to be, I would guess, maybe sort of like 2 or 3 meters tall, and we're not going to see anything sort of dramatic from there. But it does cover large portions of the actual planet itself. There's still big open areas, which is good. This one looks like an interesting little world. Now, where's all that swampland that we were looking at before? Has that changed? Sometimes the swampland will actually adapt across. You can see this is where the swamps were before. Now they've actually gone into scrubland predominantly. In this one here, we've got swamp running in through these different waterways. So this is quite interesting. Back out through here, big open plains as well. This is a very, very nice planet to play our game on. Okay, so we'll just keep on going from there. Now, this one here, we also then have sentient life forms. This is the multivan Cetodia sapiens. An evolutionary branch of multivan Cetodia has given rise to a sentient species. Alien natives classed vermoid is present on this planet. Now, these are, I think we saw before there was like reptilians. You've got vermoids, which are worm-based. So this is basically what's that game? Earthworm Jim. Sort of creatures. But we can find out more about them. If we go to auxiliary information, we can then actually see what went on. Now, this is the biosphere and atmosphere details, where we've got the atmospheric compatibility level for us is 10, and the xenobiology compatibility level is 7. This is why we can certainly breathe the atmosphere and do whatever else we want to be doing on this particular planet. So it's very, very breathable. And this is the hunting aspect. Now, if we have a look, this is the stuff that evolved, and so this is the actual origins in through this side. So now that's the evolution. If I just go to this one in through here, that's the best of them. We might have a look at this one to start with. So these are the current sorts of creatures, like the main species, I guess. So not all of them, but the main species that we'll be playing with in the game. And so these are the ones that are currently alive and when they evolved. And so we've got the multivan Cestoda, which is not the sentient creatures, but these evolved like 2 billion years ago. They're vertebrate, advanced, they've got lungs and minimal feet. So it's just sort of a bit of a feel for the animal aspect. This would be like the great apes for us. So that's sort of where they would be. So most things evolved about up to 2 billion years ago. The maxiannelids evolved, vertebrate advanced lungs with wings. So there's got flying units. Most of them are vertebrates. So most of them have actually, even though they started off as worm analogues, they've actually now adapted to actually have like internal bone structures. Now this is interesting. We've got Unispore evolved. This is a silicoid structures, so silicon-based, fuzzy wax back and through here. I don't know what that actually is. That's the archowart. And more like this one here, this squid evolved with bones. This one evolved as well. These are the things that are currently alive on the planet. These are the things that went extinct to then form a lot of these things. So, early life. And some of these will be plants, some of them will be animals. So you can see there, most of these just sort of, the doxy lobster and so on and so forth all came to. And so the game has actually sort of plotted this life cycle on this particular planet. And it's always different, it's always going to be different. These are what's currently, like I guess, the top of the tree in terms of land plants. So what we have in through here, we've got the archowarts, and the size is S. So we've got size of 3 meters. Actually, Unispore goes up to 10 meters. So it's like that's almost trees. Like even though it's sort of saying bush, most of these will be unispore. So whether that's sort of something where it's got like a massive spore that on the top of a trunk, who knows? It can be whatever you want it to be, I guess. The next one is its offensive capabilities. And so this is sort of like how strong it is, I guess, in certain things, how defensive it is. In this case, it would be reasonably hard to chop these things down. And then the competitive nature is how quickly they will expand and grow. That's sort of how that sort of then does work. So size, offense is my understanding of it, defense and competitiveness. And then we've got the total biomass on the actual planet itself. Now we've got land plants, land herbivores. So we've got a couple of herbivores. These are only 260. These are in millimeters, by the way. So 200, like 0.2 meters. So these are really going to be quite small. And the mini annelids, the herbivores, are 1.4 meters is their size. You can see if they've got a strong defense with these sorts of things, that can be a bit of a problem. That one here looks fairly strong. And the competitive nature means that they're likely to wander. And so these guys are going to become, there's going to be swarms of these things wandering around causing problems. And there's a lot of them. Total specimens is a hell of a lot of these things on the actual planet itself. So they're a bit of an issue. Now, the land carnivores. So we've got the gastroannelids stand at 2.5 metres, so this is fairly tall. And they've got an offence of 16, but very low defence, so we should be able to take on them fairly well, but they will wander. But the maxiannelids are only 0.6 metres tall, very high offence. Again, the defence is fairly weak, but the competitive nature is really, really high. And so these could sort of move around quite a lot, and depending on what they've got, in terms of their structures, and they can also be randomly adapt when we play the game as well. So we have to be a little bit careful. Now the top land predator stands at 1.5 meters, so not as tall as this one over through here. Its offensive level is lower, but the defense is higher, but it's still got the same very, very high competitive nature where it sort of moves around. That's the Multivan Cestoda. That actually is the precursor to the sentient life form. We then actually have all the sea different creatures which we don't need to really worry about. But that is actually this predator, the top land predator, is also became the sentient species on the planet, which would normally be smaller than this. So the worm creatures that we're going to have, the worm aliens we're going to have, are going to be, they're going to stand a bit smaller than that. Interesting. Anyway, just to sort of see what the game actually does sort of throw. Let's just go back to the current step. We'll go continue. By the way, the air pressure doesn't change. So you see there 870 millibars. Once we get past that early phase, it'd be good if it did show when it was generated, just so that you knew. Just so if you knew if you particularly wanted to have air forces, that you could actually know that when it's actually generated, because you can re-roll as many times as you like. In that previous one, the air pressure has essentially been created right from the very, very first planetary generation with that spin. Okay, colonization. So Quinus Patronum is the actual planet that we're on. It was colonized in the year 7144, and that's in now years. It received colonists for 845 years. Now, we've got 53.5 million. Now, if you are playing on a, the more that you end up with here, the more ruins you're going to end up having, essentially. Now, you can see there we've got a very high agricultural economy. Now, I say very high, but the number doesn't look all that high. For these sorts of planets, having anything over about 5% usually means it's got a lot going on with it. So that's the percentage of the population essentially that was dedicated to agriculture. You'll tend to find that in fact, if I just re-roll a little bit, if we try to find one that's going to be a lot lower and a lot higher, we'll see the lower ones will have much higher. Actually, that one's not even a billion. This one is mainly to do with agriculture, and you can see there they're building farms all over the place. They've actually completely strip farmed the planet in this instance with building farms everywhere underneath there. If we re-roll it again, and we'll try to get something where we've got like a couple of billion people, you'll sort of see the agricultural economy will come right down. Yeah, 2.5 billion. The agricultural economy is still very strong in these areas, and you can see that we've now got like bigger cities in around the place as well. But the agricultural economy, even though it's very, very strong on the planet, is only 11, but that's still massively strong. So that's a lot of people. That's going to be a lot of ruins. Might re-roll one more, just so I'm going to try for about 1 billion. I'll just re-roll and see how we go. It's too low. That won't give me enough ruins. So I still want to just keep on going with some ruins. You can see how strong the agricultural economy is there. And it generates a history as well. So it's still not enough. Come on, generate. It's even less. So we've got, sort of there's nothing that's sort of formed into there. We'll keep on re-rolling until I get. I'll take anything close to a billion. This one will do. Okay, so Zekosira 3 was colonized in the year 6660. So it received colonists for 1,333 years. And so we have a thing like a mining company got there first, then expert farmers arrived on the planet. Valuable deposits have been found in deep layers, so miners flock to the planet. Small groups of poor, desperate farmers have been arriving on the planet. So very much built around agriculture after an initial mining boom. Special deposits have been found attracting much more mining companies. This is in the early days. There's still a lot of history to go. It's becoming a mining hub. The planet is to be seen as a good farming planet. Xenobiologists are ecstatic about the native alien civilizations. Many flock to the planet. Xenolinguists found a specialised university to better study the unique languages of the local sentient aliens. This all has bearing on the actual game, even though this is hundreds and hundreds of years in the past. Farmers on the planet have started an agricultural school. Farmers on the planet managed to bioengineer a plant-based drug that has demand off-world. An underground cavern system allows farmers to grow a special kind of rare xeno mushroom, much appreciated in the restaurants of sector capital. The planet is attracting medical and biological companies. So the great university of the planet is considered one of the best in the sector. So we're getting we're getting infrastructure now on the actual planet itself, and several small companies have created workshops on the planet. So we're now starting to get more services as well. But this is still a very, very strong agricultural economy. If we sort of zoom back out, we can see that there's farms everywhere on this planet, which is there's hardly any of the scrub left. It's all been taken over by human farms. There's some areas in the middle here. There's still farms in through here as well. I thought that would be too hot for them to actually sort of really be viable. I thought up around the poles would be better farming. Anyway, interesting. Again, the game changes things. With each phase, certain things actually happen with the game. This is why I just get so engaged with the game. It's just so rich, this history. I know I've gone for well over an hour now, and I love it. I love this aspect of the game. I could just keep on doing these planets and just trying to imagine what the planet would actually look like by doing all this. Let's continue on. So, and I'll finish it at the last phase. The next phase we don't get to re-roll. We can re-roll any of these, but this next phase we can't. So now we have the Dissolution War, and what we get is what we get. So our 783 million people will now disappear and be chopped right down. So we're going to have hundreds of years of warfare on the actual planet itself, and not just warfare on this planet, but across the whole galaxy. So the galaxy collapses. The civilization collapses. So the Dissolution War, and look at this, look at all the farms that have now disappeared. The native shrub has now sort of come back into the landmass. I can see that there is actually a farm community back in there, a little one up in this area, but not much else. Let's have a look and see what we've got. So if we go back across, we've got the Dissolution War reached Zequasira 3 in the year 7993. War consumed all, technology fell to barbaric levels in over a century of warfare and collapse. And so we still have 4 million, which is a lot of people on the planet. A lot of scavengers, some hunters, a lot of farmers. So it's going to be reasonably easy for us in terms of because of that high level of farming that's actually going on. And so I won't read all of this, but it's essentially it took a lot of there's a lot that went on. So that this history sidebar in 8009, several major companies have evacuated the high-tech installations from the planet. So local reformist forces tried to storm the planetary senate in 8016. 8025, neighbouring systems started to hamster goods and liquid energy from the planet. So they're denuding the planet of its resources, of the mined resources or the processed resources. A forgotten nuclear reactor went into meltdown, radiating Zalora. So there'll be a place somewhere on the planet. This is fairly early. There may still not be any radiation left over from that one, but there may be somewhere. Okay, we know that's where the major player, that's where our nemesis is going to be, back down there. So we will keep a mental note of that one. Not seeing any radiation zones, but if it was fairly recent, there would be zones on the surface here somewhere where radiation would still be a problem. That's not a problem. So forgotten nuclear reactor went into meltdown. This is in 8107. 8136, out of nowhere, a giant unmanned spaceship crashed into Tellurian. So there'll be wreckage somewhere on the planet that we can then go and find different things from that one. A powerful raider clan decided to set an example and killed all their enemies in Pelorum. An internal struggle led to massive and extremely savage infighting in Zezonia. Okay, so we're sort of seeing different things. A powerful raider clan decided to set an example and killed all their enemies in Totonion, and alien natives started raiding 14 zones, so the aliens are getting aggressive. And an insane warlord in 8259, an insane warlord completely destroys the Vonamar, murdering all the citizens in these old towns. Now, there will be different places, like this will be one of the cities we just sort of saw back in through, oops, hang on, where are we? Like we can sort of pick where the old cities will end up being. Some of these will be built on the ruins of cities. Like this is probably going to be the main city that used to be there, for example. Just look for the old ruins. Really, that's where the cities will end up being if there's collections of ruins together. Now there wasn't that many. Actually, where was it? I saw one. Is it further this way? Yeah, this one over here looks interesting. So this was, and this one as well, these are going to be old ruins that are no longer, and this one in through here as well. So some of them have still got civilizations that are working within them. I'll just scoot across, try to see if I can find them. So that one is probably going to be an old city. That will be like one of the old history. There'll be a history there. There'll be histories, and this is actually now accessible in the game. This one here looks very interesting with the potential of that being like a fairly large city back in the colonization era, like 200 years or so, or actually more than 200 years, nearly 300 years, I think, in this particular planet, where it's just gone on and on and on for a long, long period of time. Anyway, that's sort of where we are with after the dissolution war. Let's just go and continue, and we then get the summary of the actual planet itself. And so it just summarizes, we've got two major regimes. There's us and the one other Nemesis player. And there's 102 minor regimes. It's a lot. Sentient alien life forms make up only 8 of these minors. So there's not that many sentients on the actual planet itself. And just so we sort of are aware of what's going on. This will be an interesting playthrough, I think, on this particular planet. But each planet can be wildly different. That's what I love about this game. It's just so procedural. I'm not going to say random because it's not. You can see how detailed the procedural generation is of the planets. It's not just random map generation. This is really considered. And that's why it's taken me an hour and a quarter to just get to this point here. So we're ready to go into the actual game. Don't worry if you lose track of this sort of information. It's in the game. So let's just start the game and see where we sort of start off. Now I'm just going to go and pick. I think I mentioned about the mods that I'm playing with. This is one of my mods where I've just got my logo, so the DAS Tactic logo. I will actually change the regime name to Dastopia. Let's just go that way. President will be fine. The primary colours, actually the primary colour, I'll go with like a reddish colour, just so I get my branded colours, I guess. So I'll just go with like a deepish red. And we'll go with a yellowy sort of colour as well. I'll just go to the unit colour, and I won't make it a bright colour. I'll just make it, I'll keep it around there, but just maybe a shade lighter. Just going to make it go up through there. All right, so now that's all fine. I'll just leave that where that is. So a lot of symbols have been taken up on this particular planet. This is interesting. Just click on OK. Now, I will go through this aspect. These all have different bearings on sort of what your initial focus is for your survivors. And so the leaders that you actually have and the people that you attract into into leadership roles will tend to have sort of pro whatever you sort of go with. Now, we've got 3 different profiles in 3 different categories. So the first category we've got is between government, enforcement, and commerce. Now, I like to go to government myself, but these are all, doesn't really matter whichever one of these you want to go with. So let's just go with government. Now, the next one is like sort of, these are more like you got fist, mind, and heart. So heart is sort of like the courage or whatever it is of the population. Mind is sort of whether you're more likely to be more scientific, and fist means whether you're going to be sort of more aggressive. Now, I tend to always go heart unless there's sentient aliens, but with only 8 of them on the actual, only 8 sentient groups on the planet, I think I'm going to go heart. So I'm just going to go that way. And then you've got democracy, meritocracy, and autocracy. These are probably the most important that you then sort of pursue. Autocracy will mean that you play very aggressively, but you then have to police what you're doing. Meritocracy means that you're going to be sort of much more based on sort of research, and this is another good one if you are wanting to get friendly with the aliens. And democracy is one that you can start to use money to then buy off the unhappiness of your population. This is one I like to play because after you get past the initial difficult stages of the game, democracy is an easy way to play where you don't need to police anywhere near as much as with autocracy, for example. So I'll play with democracy. And just preparing our turn. Suffered no losses. We'll start the turn in through here. So it always just goes through the same one. So previous president is now buried. So we just go through that one. You're the president of Dastopia. That's just telling us what's going on. You have these zeitgeists that wander through the land. These are the epochs that we set up at the start of the creation. And so this one is a time of relative calm, which is fine. And so you gain political bonus points essentially in this particular phase. These are the various cards that we're starting with. We're starting with a scientific outpost, which has cost us 3 fate points. We'll talk about this when we get into the actual game itself. Nothing much there, really. It's all that great for us. Sometimes a rebellion can be a good one to flick at the very, very start of the game because it gives you 6 more fate points, and that can be valuable. And it's easy enough to control that at the very, very start. It's more difficult later on. So that's something we may have a look at, depending on where we start. We also got Recruit Merc, and we've got an Open Contact. Right, we'll close that one off. We'll come back and have a look at that one in just a little while. Welcome in command. So yep, we get a bit of a welcome message, and we're in the south here. Now, if we start to sort of zoom back out again and have a bit of a look to see where we are, where are we in relation to those other... Yeah, there's the 3 that we were seeing there before. So, and we think there's the other ones that we were looking at are going to be... Now, we can tell that that's going to have like a civilization around it. There's still farmlands going on through there. The other one with the big ruins was back over here. Now, on the other side, the Nemesis player, we think, is over here somewhere, based on what we were sort of seeing. So we think that they're going to be over in this region of the map somewhere, in the south as well. Not that it's going to worry us in the short term. Now, there's a few things that we'll have a look at. I won't actually play any more than this at this point in time. We'll just sort of zoom on in, and then we'll talk in the next episode what we've got, what we have to look for, and how things are going to be working. So the first episode that we actually play, this will be in episode 0. The first episode 1 will be really just sort of establishing what we need and what we need to focus on. And we can see that there's actually farmlands in through here as well. So we'll talk about what we're seeing, what everything actually is, and how we then proceed. Thanks for watching. I will catch you then.